I really loved living in the gypsy caravan. I loved it especially in the evenings, when I was tucked up in my bunk and my father was telling me stories. The paraffin lamp was turned low, and I could see lumps of wood glowing red-hot in the old stove, and wonderful it was to be lying there snug and warm in my bunk in that little room. Most wonderful of all was the feeling that when I went to sleep, my father would still be there, very close to me, sitting in his chair by the fire, or lying in the bunk above my own. My father, without the slightest doubt, was the most marvellous and exciting father any boy ever had. You might think, if you didn't know him well, that he was a stern and serious man. He wasn't. He was actually a wildly funny person. What made him appear so serious was the fact that he never smiled with his mouth. He did it all with his eyes. He had brilliant blue eyes, and when he thought of something funny, his eyes would flash, and if you looked carefully, you could actually see a tiny little golden spark dancing in the middle of each eye. I was glad my father was an eye smiler. It meant he never gave me a fake smile, because it's impossible to make your eyes twinkle if you aren't feeling twinkly yourself. A mouth smile is different. You can fake a mouth smile any time you want, simply by moving your lips. I've also learned that a real mouth smile always has an eye smile to go with it, so watch out, I say, when someone smiles at you with his mouth but the eyes stay the same. It's sure to be bogus. My father was not what you would call an educated man, and I doubt if he'd read 20 books in his life, but he was a marvellous storyteller. He used to make up a bedtime story for me every single night, and the best ones were turned into serials and went on for many nights running. One of them, which must have gone on for at least 50 nights, was about an enormous fellow called the Big Friendly Giant, or the BFG for short. The BFG was 3 times as tall as an ordinary man, and his hands were as big as wheelbarrows. He lived in a vast underground cavern, not far from our filling station, and he only came out into the open when it was dark. Occasionally, as he told his stories, my father would stride up and down, waving his arms and waggling his fingers, but mostly he would sit close to me on the edge of my bunk and speak very softly. The Big Friendly Giant makes his magic powders out of the dreams that children dream when they're asleep. How? Tell me, Dad. Dreams, my love, are very mysterious things. They float around in the night air like little clouds. Can you see them? Nobody can see them. Then how does the Big Friendly Giant catch them? Ah, that is the interesting part. A dream, you see, as it goes drifting through the night air, makes a tiny little buzzing, humming sound. A sound so soft and low it's impossible for ordinary people to hear it. But the BFG can hear it easily. He can hear the whisperings of ants. He can hear the sudden shrill cry of pain a tree gives out when a woodsman cuts into it with an axe. Ah, yes, my darling, there's a whole world of sound around us that we cannot hear. What happens when he catches the dreams? He imprisons them in glass bottles and screws the tops down tight. He has thousands of these bottles in his cave. Does he catch bad dreams as well as good ones? Yes, but he only uses good ones in his powders. What does he do with the bad ones? He explodes them. What does the BFG do with his powders after he's made them? In the dead of night, he goes prowling through the villages, searching for houses where children are asleep. Because of his great height, he can reach windows that are 1 and even 2 flights up, and when he finds a room with a sleeping child, he opens his suitcase. His suitcase? The FG always carries a suitcase and a blowpipe. The blowpipe is as long as a lamppost. The suitcase is for the powders. So he opens the suitcase and selects exactly the right powder, and he puts it into the blowpipe, and he slides the blowpipe in through the open window, and poof! He blows in the powder, and the powder floats around the room, and the child breathes it in. And then what? And then, Danny, the child begins to dream a marvellous and fantastic dream. And suddenly the dream is not a dream any longer, but a real happening. And the child is fully awake and is actually in the place of the dream and is taking part in the whole thing, in real life. More about that tomorrow. It's getting late. Good night, Danny. Go to sleep. My father kissed me, and then he turned down the wick of the little paraffin lamp until the flame went out. He seated himself in front of the wood stove, which now made a lovely red glow in the dark room.